guys, I'm Alicia with Purple Lily Art, and I'm a colored pencil and mixed media artist. And today is our first video in my How to Improve as an Artist series. So number one is to take art classes. And I mean in-person art classes where you're in a room with other people and a teacher. I have always loved to draw. And I feel that I have some natural talent, but I decided when I wanted to become a professional artist that if I wanted to compete with other artists, that I had to improve my skills. So I signed up for classes at my local community college, and it is probably one of the best things that I have done for myself. There are so many benefits to being in an in-person class, and I'm going to talk about 5 of those. So number one is socialization. Now let's face it, a lot of artists are introverts. Not all of them, I understand. I'm an extrovert, but a lot of artists are introverts. And being an artist, we spend so much time alone in our studios or wherever we work. And sometimes we have very little interaction with other people. And that's not good for us. We all need interaction at some point in time. So take an art class. You are in a group of people that you can talk to and share with and just be together with. And the energy in those art classes that I took was so positive. It was just a great experience. Okay. Number 2, you are surrounding yourself with other like-minded people. So anybody who signs up for a college art class, a drawing class, or a sculpting class, or ceramics, most likely they are there because they want to be there and they want to improve and they love art and creating. So you're going to be in a room surrounded by people who love the same thing that you love. So take advantage of that. Get to know them. Talk about your art and stuff, you know? So that's a good thing, right? And then number 3, you will have a skilled instructor right there at the ready. You can ask them questions. You can have them watch your technique. You can have them demonstrate multiple times if you need to. It's really important. You know, art is very hands-on, right? We're using our hands, whatever. It's very important to see it in person. For example, in my Ceramics 1 class, we were throwing pottery. And the most important part about throwing pottery is getting your clay centered on the wheel, right? And I was having trouble getting it centered and starting that initial pull to get the clay to start going up, right? And so I went to the instructor and I said, can you please show me how to do this while I'm standing behind you so I get that first person perspective, you know? He reluctantly said yes because I don't think that he really liked me, but that's okay. And I stood behind him and I watched him. And it clicked. I figured it out. He had shown us multiple times, but until then, until I was like, I need this, it wasn't clicking. And because I asked, because I had him there, it worked, right? And then another example of being able to be, or benefiting having that teacher in there with you, we were doing in my Painting 1 class, we had to do an analogous color scheme painting. And analogous colors are 2 or more colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. I chose red, orange, and yellow. And I did fish. So, you know, you have that swirling pattern that you see in this picture, right? Well, I was struggling to figure out what to add to the fish in the background because I had the assumption that I was going to put the opposite color in there and make them darker and almost black. because that in my head made sense. If they're further away from you, they need to be darker and, you know, turning into almost black. Well, my instructor came around and she saw what I was doing when I was mixing my paint, and she's like, they need to be silvery. They need to have a slight silver tint to them, because when you're in water, those fish kind of, they become silvery and they blend into the background. So if you have a dark blue background, your fish are going to blend in and become dark blue, and you're going to not really be able to see them. They're not going to be black specks. I was like, oh, okay. So she and I worked on making that silvery color that still had the red and the orange and the yellow in it. And without her standing there, walking around the classroom and then seeing that I was struggling, then I would have never figured it out. I mean, sure, I could have looked it up, but would I have actually found what I needed, right? And so that's another really good example of how having that teacher in the classroom right in front of you is very beneficial. Okay, so number 4, the fourth reason that I have, that's a very important, why the fourth benefit for taking in-person classes. You get used to having your art seen. You get used to having people walking around you while you're working. A lot of artists, a lot of times, and I've been that person, I was in the beginning of, you know, trying to figure out how to be an artist. I didn't want anybody to see my work until it was finished. If somebody walked in the room while I was working, I shut down. I'm like, nope, can't see it. And I panicked, right? Because I didn't know if I was making mistakes. I didn't know. And I didn't want people watching. But in an in-person classroom, people walk around. You're encouraged to walk around and look at other people's artwork. Your teacher is always walking around looking at your art. Other teachers come in and look at your artwork. If you want to be a professional artist, you have to get used to people looking at your artwork. You have to get used to being in the room while people are looking at your artwork. And it's hard, because while we may think that it looks good, we still have doubt, right? So an example of this, in my painting class, I was right inside the door and I'm painting, and another teacher comes in, and he's an art teacher. He taught drawing and figure drawing. Comes in and he stops right behind me. And I was like, oh my gosh, why are you behind me? And he's watching for several minutes while I'm working. I just keep going. And my teacher walks up and starts talking to him. And I hear him say, oh my gosh, look at the texture in that paper. He's like, that's amazing. And I was like, yay, I made the right choice in how I presented that texture. And it made me feel good. So it builds confidence. It proves to us that we are not going to, like, I don't know, it's not going to affect our work if people are looking. We need to, you know, get used to that. So that's the fourth reason. And then number 5, the number 5 benefit is that you can get honest, constructive criticism. And I don't know if this happens in every college art class. I'm assuming that it does, because that's part of the learning process. And this is a really hard thing for a lot of artists. It's a really hard thing for people in general doing anything, is being critiqued. Because we, for some reason, have convinced ourselves that criticism is always negative. But it's not. It can be very beneficial. We just have to learn how to accept it, and we have to learn how to give it. So in all of my art classes, when we finished a project, sometimes in the middle of the project, but most of the time at the end, we would all line up our artwork, and the instructor would give us a form that we had to fill out that had questions on it about other people's art. And so we had to pick 2 or 3 other artists' artwork to critique, and then we had to critique our own. But we were supposed to be objective about it, not subjective. There was a little section, I think, where we could add our opinion if we wanted to, but we were looking at objective critiques. So we would walk around and we would talk about, you know, does this look harmonious? Do the colors work? Things like that, right? And that, it just really helped because we got used to having people talk about our artwork. And there are going to be times in your art career, if you do get it into a gallery, which I hope you do, I hope I do, there's going to be people that are like, oh my God, and they're just going to tear it apart. They're going to think it's horrible. Well, we got to get used to handling that because it's going to happen. We have to get used to rejection, right? One of the guys in our class, he did this painting, and it was the analogous, or not analogous. Yeah, it was the analogous painting. And he did not like it at all. He hated it. But when we did our critique, I was like, no, you did a great job using the 3 colors you picked out. And I like this painting. I think this is a great painting because it reminds me of my youngest child. So while we are worried about criticism, positive criticism does exist, and that's what we should be looking for. How can we improve? What can we tell this artist? What can we take from their critique of our art to improve ourselves? And you get that in a classroom. Everybody's in the same position. Everybody's getting critiques. It's a safe place to learn how to take positive and negative criticism sometimes, right? So those are my 5 benefits of in-person classes. There are other options, and I have done some of the other options. One of the other options is to take an online class. And I mean like a Skillshare class where you actually have interaction with the teacher. And it may all be in an online email type of format, but they give you the lesson, you do the activity, you send them pictures, you can ask them questions, they can comment back. So there is that back and forth that's going to help you improve. And you can ask questions. So Skillshare classes, anything that is like that, you know, I agree with that. You can do that as a, you know, as a class as well. There are also art guilds. There are art societies. There are local galleries that have artists that teach classes. Some of them you pay $10 a class to go in, and it's just a basic, you know, you spend an hour, 2 hours, just a basic overview, right? That's still good. You're still getting that interaction. You're still talking to a group of people. You're still watching them work, learning new tips, seeing their technique. So those are good too. Sign up for a real in-person classroom, okay? Do that first. There are also other options, but I used the online options, and these are the other options, as like a refresher, or as I want to incorporate some other aspect of art into my drawing. How do I even begin doing that? So I watched YouTube videos. Now these should not be your main classes that you take. These should just be as refreshers, as just, let's see if these other ways of doing things could work for me. Because I'm doing a hand series coming up, and I forgot how to present foreshortening. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing hands. Hands are hard. I've forgotten how to draw hands because I did it a lot in my drawing class, but I forgot. So I watched David Finch. He's a comic book artist. He has a YouTube, how to draw hands. So I watched his and several others, how to do, you know, the shapes and stuff of hands, and how to foreshorten. Because, you know, this piece, if this finger's coming at you, this is going to be smaller than this section, and it's going to make it look more like it's at you, or it's going to be just the end of the finger, right? And I needed to remember that because my hands were looking silly. So use YouTube or other online sources or drawing books as that second option, as that refresher option, but go to an in-person class, whatever kind you could find, okay? So that is your action plan for this month. Find a class, sign up for it, and enjoy sharing the process with other people. So let's get busy and start growing together as artists.